Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. I woke up this morning and like Cersei Lannister, I chose violence. So we're watching Vinland Saga episode 7. Episode 6 was really good, really heartbreaking, really tragic, really sad, and really good. So I have a feeling that's going to be my thoughts about this entire season. It's going to be heartbreaking, tragic, and really good. So I've got some comments from episodes 4 and 5, which have come out in episode 6, that have recently come out on Patreon. I know that recently, as of yesterday, the trailer dropped for season 2, which is coming out in January. That's really exciting. So, like half a year from now, season 2 is going to be out. So, I think Wushin Sweebian on Discord was like, well, by the time you're done with season 1, it'll be mid-October. And I was like, oh yeah, it'll be mid-October and I'm done with this season. And that'll only leave like a couple months before season 2. So, I'm pretty lucky. I don't have to wait like you all have for all this time before season 2 comes out. I'm pretty lucky in that regard. To answer anyone's questions, I'm not watching the season 2 trailer before I finish season 1. I think someone asked that and I'm like, why would I do that? So it's like, no. Now when I'm done with season 1, will I go and watch the season 2 trailer? Maybe, but that's the thing. It depends because like with shows like Attack on Titan, I want to go in as blind as possible. So I'm not going to watch any previews for that series because I want to be completely surprised. So I'm debating. I'm like, I don't know. Depending on where this season ends, I'm like, will I want to be spoiled in any regard? Or will I want to go in completely blind and neutral? So I may end up polling Patreon in October to see what they think, what you all think. Before going any further, because there's a part of me that's like, yeah, it'll be cool to hype it up and be like, all right, hype up for January, and then there'll be another part of me that's like, but do I really want to be having any spoilers whatsoever? Because I like, with a show like this, I like going in not knowing anything and kind of piecing things together as we go. But it depends. I've watched trailers for other shows, so I'm not totally against it. It'll just depend when we get closer. But I'm pretty excited. I've heard Mappa's taken over. Man, Wit Studio, just Mappa taking over everything, right? I guess as long as it gets done and it's done well and the animators get some sleep, that'd be great. You know, if y'all could finish Ice Adolescence, I'd really appreciate it, Mappa. But before we take on any other projects from other companies, but whatever. Anyway, I've got some comments before we start this episode. Edgar had a really cool comment about how Askeladd back in episode 5 could have like a nihilistic or fatalist view when he views death as inevitable and there's no glory in death. And so that's why when it's asked, you know, how Thor's passed, he's like, oh, he just died. Like I really like that idea that Askeladd really doesn't see any like glory in death. There's no like, it kind of goes against sort of the Viking code where it's like, oh, there's all this glory in battle and stuff. And Askeladd's like, no, we just got to go through the motions and do what we got to do to accomplish our goals, whatever those are, and there's no glory in death, it's just death. Which also explains why he's so mad and frustrated, it seems, when Thor's dies, because he's like, what a waste. He's like, this guy could have done so much with his life, and yet he had to die. It's like, it's just, you know, Askeladd's a very, very interesting character, and I feel like we're slowly peeling back more layers with him as we go, very subtly. And I like that idea that maybe he is a little bit nihilistic about that. That's pretty cool. But then, you know, with that comes the idea of, well, what's the purpose of this profession? You know, if you really have a nihilistic view and you're like, well, there's no glory in death and you're just going to die anyway, so why is he pursuing this specific lifestyle? And I feel like as we go through this series, we'll probably get more into Askeladd's character and why he is doing the things that he's doing. So that's interesting to think about. Also, I like that we're getting more on Bjorn. Bjorn becoming more interesting. He's not just a meat-headed character. He's actually getting more layers to him as well. But Bjorn kind of challenges the ideals in episode 6. He's like, yeah, you know, Thor's was pacifist and idealistic, and that's fine as long as you don't live in this Viking world. He's like, yeah, and that worked for where Thor's had escaped to. That peaceful ideology worked for where Thor's was, but he was running away from a world that was chasing after him. And so Bjorn's kind of like, yeah, no, in the Viking world, the pacifism and idealism, you'll die. Like, there's just that's not going to work here. So, you know, in the face of the war that they're expecting with England, he's like, yeah, if the Vikings did as Thor has done, then yeah, the world's not civilized enough at this point in this segment of history. The world around them isn't civilized enough to accept that peaceful pacifist ideology. Like the world that we currently live in now has room for that, right? Because, and civilized may not be the exact word for it, but in the world that we currently live in modern times has room for pacifism and ideologies like Thor's, but the world that they're currently living in Vinland Saga doesn't exactly have room for that. So it's interesting, right? There's consequences that Bjorn talks about in episode 6 that are very interesting. Anita Meyer, she points out that Thor's is only 5'11". He seems like a monstrous man. How is he only 5'11"? I was like, wait, what? So Thorkel apparently is insanely tall, but I'm like, but how is Thor's only 5'11"? Like, he seems like a mountain of a man. How short are these people? I'm like 5'8", so 5'11's not that much taller than me. So I'm like, really? Thor's seemed like he was like 6'4", so that's interesting. Dante says that there's some people that blame Thorfinn for Thor's death. I'm like, really? No, I totally disagree with that. I think Thor's was going to die no matter what. In that scenario, Askeladd, the moment you saw the archers on the cliff top, it's like Thor's was going to die. There's no way he could have avoided that. It was going to happen. Either he was going to die or his crew was going to die, including Thorfinn. They were just lucky that Askeladd is a man of his word and was like, I'm just here to kill Thor's, not anybody else. The rest I'm going to take you as slaves if I can, but I'm not going to kill you. My only mission is to kill Thor's. That's the only one I've been hired and paid to do so. So yeah, I was like, I don't think Thorfinn is responsible for his death at all. I think it was an inevitability that was unavoidable. It's just Thorfinn doesn't realize as a 6-year-old all the things that was happening in that moment, and doesn't quite get the politics and all the things involved with Askeladd being hired as a mercenary to kill his dad. I mean, now that he's 12, he may understand it a little bit more, but he's so hell-bent on revenge, and we'll talk about that he kind of overlooks certain things. But I was like, Dante, I agree. I don't think Thorfinn's responsible. And I also noted that Olaf is a pretty common name for the people in the Viking culture. I'm like, okay, so Olaf is a pretty common name. So it may not be, Askeladd's dad may not be the former king. It's just a common name. Interesting. Okay. Sal Inger noted that Askeladd's neck gesture to Thorfinn in the last episode was probably just to get him to do what he wanted to, under the guise that, hey, if you scout for me and you do these things for me, I'll give you another duel. And it's like, okay, that ties into Askeladd's character. He's just kind of stringing Thorfinn along. That makes sense. Before I get to your other comment, Sal, Nicola Kulik noted that most Vikings do know how to swim. And in the manga, it shows that when that one Viking was like struggling to swim in episode 5, Thor throws him the paddle to like grab onto. So the Vikings do probably know how to swim, which I would be like, yeah, if you're going to be on the sea for a while, it makes sense that you'd know how to swim. So that's good to know. But then to go with Sal's other comment to kind of round this out, is that we were talking about how Thorfinn's kind of stuck in this world, and Edgar and I were talking about that too. And that last shot of Thorfinn just being like, and accepting what he has to do and going through the motions to accomplish his goal, which is to kill Askeladd and to get revenge on his father. Sal Inger noted that, yeah, Thorfinn had options. He could have hopped on, even though he was a 6-year-old, and as a 6-year-old, you're like, okay, well, what options did he have? He's 6, he can't survive on his own, even though we see in episode 5 that, yeah, he kind of figures out how to survive on his own, to kill rabbits and things like that. But Sal's like, no, he could have hopped on a neighboring trade ship, and made his way back to Iceland. Could have done that. And it's like, yeah, he probably could have gotten away with that. But Thorfinn's character is so hell-bent on revenge at this point in time that he doesn't consider any of those other options viable. He wants revenge for his father's death, and he wants to kill Askeladd, and he wants to be the one to do it. And the tragedy is that Thorfinn is enveloping himself in this Viking lifestyle and in this world of violence for the sake of that revenge. That's the tragedy, is that his father has taught him all of these ideals, being like, you don't have enemies. You don't have to do anything to harm other people. You can live a peaceful life. You don't have to be surrounded by violence if you don't want to. Thor's like tries to teach him this. And the sad thing is that his whole ideologies that he tries to impart on his son they're thrown back in his face when he's killed by Askeladd, that Thorfinn just, he can't see that at this point. He's like, no. He's like, my father died. I want to get revenge on this man. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get revenge, even if it means being part of this violent system. It's like, ugh. So that's the tragedy, is that Thorfinn doesn't see the other options at this point. He just sees that he has to seek revenge, and in order to do so, he has to do X, Y, and Z, even if it means killing others and taking part in these Viking raids. He wants to do whatever he can to get this revenge on Askeladd. And that's the sad thing, is because we, the audience, can see that there's other options, but Thorfinn is just blindsided. He's got a blind spot, and that's Askeladd. And so, and he's so hell-bent on doing whatever it takes to get to that point. So yeah, so 12-year-old Thorfinn, that's where we're at in 1008 AD. And as we left off in the last episode, I liked the commentary Edgar was talking about too, that it seems like the show's making a commentary about those that get involved in violence, and in the world where violence is a reoccurring thing, it does mold you and shape you and change your perspectives about things. And Thor's was lucky that he got out when he did and was able to see beyond that into something better. And Thorfinn, he's 12 years old. He's a preteen. He just isn't seeing it. So it's like, it's going to be interesting to see if this story, I don't want spoilers obviously, but it's going to be interesting to see if this story follows Thorfinn through into his adulthood, and if he reaches the same point that Thor's did. If he meets somebody that he loves, kind of like how Thor's met Helga, if he meets somebody that he loves and kind of falls in love with her and has a family, and if Thorfinn has a family and it kind of goes through the same motions as his dad, cat's in the cradle with the silver spoon, one of those deals. That's going to be interesting to see as the story goes on, if we get to that point, or if we're going to just stay with Thorfinn. I feel like the rest of the season is going to be Thorfinn as an adolescent. Now, whether we stick with him as a 12-year-old or we do another time skip, I don't know. But I feel like we're going to follow this, at least this season is going to be Thorfinn as an adolescent, as a teenager. So that's going to be interesting. But we'll see, right? I've talked for a good solid 12 minutes. But I'm really excited for episode 7. Pretty excited to see what all happens in this episode, and to just see, now that we've established that Thorfinn is part of the Viking crew, whether he likes it or not. He doesn't like it, but he's doing it because he wants to get revenge on Askeladd, and so we'll see where that leads us. So in any case, we're going to start episode 7 of Vinland Saga, and we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. This episode, I debated bringing Whiteboard Kun out. I was like, I'm going to hold off a little bit with Whiteboard Kun. I don't think I'll need him for this. But there's a lot kind of going on under the surface with this episode, it feels like, especially in terms of talking about the characters and developing and how they're interacting with one another, and kind of the whole thing with Thorfinn. For the record, I know a lot of people have talked about this with Thorfinn so far, that the whole revenge plot thing is kind of, it is a cliche. The revenge plot trope in storytelling can be cliche, but what I like in Vinland Saga and what they do in this series is that even though Thorfinn doesn't come outright and say it, we can, as the audience, understand that Thorfinn is both in constant conflict with what he's doing, but also it's funny because Thorfinn is in conflict with what he's doing. He knows that he's killing people. He knows, we saw from the last episode, that he understands the consequences of what he's doing, but he's so bent on revenge for his father and his death that he's willing to go through with it because he feels like that's for him, that's going to be justice, to get revenge on his father's death, to kill the man that killed his father. That's going to be justice. And the interesting thing about it, the thing that makes Thorfinn different from Thor's back at the start of the series, because when we had the whole thing with Thor's at the very beginning and how unmoving he was, and that he was just killing people without a sense of purpose. That was the big thing, is that Thor's was like, I was just killing people and doing what I was told. I didn't have a sense of purpose behind it. And then even when he had a daughter, he was just like, well, give me a son next time because that's what your dad wants. I don't really see the point in it, you know? And then when Helga was like, no, you're going to name this child so that you gain a connection to your daughter and you feel that familial sense of family, that's when Thor's realized, he was like, oh, there are people I care about that I don't want to get hurt and I don't want to see hurt. And he started to realize the value of that life, and he wanted to keep, and that's what kind of led him to his pacifist ideologies. The thing of it is that Thorfinn, unlike his father when his father was in battle, Thorfinn has a purpose. And that purpose is tied to someone he loves or loved. And so that's the big thing, is that Thorfinn is doing all of this not for his country, not for himself. He's doing, well, kind of for himself, but he's doing it to get revenge on someone he deeply cared about and loved. So the funny thing is that unlike Thorfinn is fighting for someone he cares about. It's just that person's dead. The thing of it is that Thor's is like, it's almost like Thor's wanted Thorfinn to understand the value of caring for a loved one, and Thorfinn does. The only problem is that Thor's wanted that love to translate to, oh, I shouldn't be violent because of these people I care about, and instead Thorfinn's like, well, the people I care about have been killed, so now I'm going to get violent. So it's sort of, it's kind of, and it makes you wonder if Thor's had lost his family, if he'd lost his wife and children, would he react in the same way as Thorfinn? We as the audience could say, well, maybe not because of this pacifist ideology he developed, but who's to say, right? Who's to say? So we're seeing a character like Thorfinn who was given all of this ideology from a young age of don't be violent, you don't have enemies, you don't have to hurt people, you have people that care about you, you should just focus on them. Well, what happens when you lose that person? How does that change you? How does that make you want to act out? And so I like, for a revenge story, it's tied directly to Thorfinn's character in such a way that it not only makes sense, but it's interesting, right? It's not just a lame, like, I'm just going to get revenge. No, we were exploring Thorfinn's character and seeing how he feels about all of this. And he's not happy that he's there. No, he's not happy to be taking part with the Viking culture at all. He's not happy about it. He's only doing it to get Askeladd to duel him so he can kill him. And then he'd probably go back home, right? For all we know, he'd probably go back home. But Askeladd, we'll talk about Askeladd. He is like, doesn't seem too apt to want to duel Thorfinn, right? We're going to talk about it. But yeah, but I really like that aspect about it. I like that aspect about Thorfinn's character. And I guess you could argue, like, well, he still has his wife, he still has his mom and his sister. He could just go back and care for them, which I think is what Thor's wanted him to do. But Thor's just underestimated how deeply rooted Thorfinn's love of his father was, and how deeply rooted that revenge and that desire to get revenge was in him. So what can we do, right? What can we do? But so this episode was really interesting. We're getting kind of outside of England. We went to France, migrated south to France. Why not? So we get this idea leading up to the start of this episode that the Vikings attacks and everything were starting to intensify against England. And so we see these people like immigrating and migrating from their home, right? England 12 AD. So yeah, Thorfinn's 16 years old now, growing up to be a young man, not getting any taller. But yeah, the idea of these people like going away from home that's been attacked and going to these villages and everything and setting up tents and things. So in October, the attacks, which had continued for several years, reached a turning point. Okay, so we get to the vicinity of Jelling, Denmark. So Sweyn's estate, this fort. So this is where the king of Denmark is held up at. So they've been fighting nonstop for 4 years, right, on and off, right? But now it's reaching a turning point where they're going to stage. It looks like they've been, from what I understand, and I don't want to be spoiled with the history of it because I know this is tied to history, but it seems like they've been doing on and off battles and skirmishes the last 4 years, trying to weaken England's forces to lead up to resting over the winter, and then in the summer of the following year, doing an onslaught, full-on scale attack of England to try to wipe them out. Okay, makes sense. And so we go to this king and Floki's still around. Floki has aged quite a bit in the last, what has it been, 8 years? Yeah, it's been longer because Thorfinn was 6 and now he's 16, so it's been 10 years. So it's been a decade. That Askeladd, he ain't aged a day. Askeladd, he's got some, whatever his skin routine is, washing his skin with the blood of his enemies. It's working because that man hasn't aged a day. But Floki has aged. You can see he's got a lot more wrinkles. He looks much older in 10 years. He's like, we're not withdrawing, we're letting them rest. And the king looks old. He, like, his skin is very sallow and like pale and kind of has like a purplish tone to it. Marching in winter weakens them. And the way that he slowly lifts his hands, like, he doesn't seem like he's in good health. The King of Denmark does not seem like he's in good health. It seems like you might want to have like a runner up in the wings in case if he doesn't make it through winter. He says, let the soldiers rest. Okay. And so I like that his throne has like little dragon heads on it. And then he says, in the summer we're going to strike. And he seems like he just doesn't seem like he's in great health, right? I too shall lead an army in battle. So I feel like just from that I don't think, maybe the king doesn't think he has long to live. And he's like, we're going to strike in summer and I'm going to go into battle because if I die, I die. Probably going to die anyway. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. It's interesting. Just the way that he's depicted in this and the way that his movements are animated, he just seems kind of frail, which is interesting. But then, yeah. So we have all of our troops and stuff, and they're all suddenly, so we get a base. So the Danish army base, I want to go home. We don't need those pirates for now either. So yeah, that's the thing. The funny thing in all of this is that you have the Danish army, you have Floki, who's central in the military there, and then you have Askeladd, and Askeladd's not really part of the army. They're just Danish, they're just mercenaries. They're just rogue pirates that are working with the Vikings and working with the Danish army, and they're like, yeah, we're just kind of doing our own thing, but we're on your side, don't worry. You guys can hire us to do whatever. And so they're kind of like in off season now. They're not needed for the winter, right? Because they're not pillaging any more villages. And I do appreciate this show. We keep the same cast around, like the blonde guy, like he's in all the episodes. He's still there. Like you see like just the main, poor Ears got killed though. But you see like all the same guys there. I thought I'd be able to earn a lot this year. We can't do anything now that the army is staying put. This is why I hate being a hired hand. Yeah, because you're basically dependent upon them to give you a job. And then what is Askeladd going to do? I like that him and Bjorn are up there and everybody's waiting to see what they want to do. And I love Bjorn's just eating like a fish, just a raw fish. I have grown to appreciate Bjorn's character over the last couple episodes a little bit more. And we'll talk about that because Bjorn seems to more openly caring about Thorfinn than Askeladd, but Askeladd cares about Thorfinn in a weird way. We'll talk about it. But Bjorn's just like, what are we doing? I love that everybody looks to Askeladd as their leader. And dude has not aged in 10 years. Looks the same. It'd be a shame to spend all winter like this doing nothing. We've already raided all the good villages. And I love that he's like, we're going to do as the birds do. We're going to go seek food. We can't do anything else about it. I love that there's that adventurous spirit in Askeladd where he's got like that ingenuity and that adventurous spirit. He's like, we'll just do what the birds do. We'll just migrate south for the winter and go where the food is. Like it's all a survival mentality. So again, I talked at the beginning of this why Askeladd's doing the things that he's doing if he in fact does have like a fatalist or nihilistic mindset. And really the thing is he's like, it's just survival. Like I'm going to do what I can during this life and live the life that I can. And so by the end of this episode, you definitely see why he's a mercenary, why he's a pirate, because he's like, he has the freedom to do whatever he wants. He just kind of goes along and does these little odd jobs for people, but the way that he does them are his own. And he ends up kind of tweaking the deal as he goes and has the freedom to do so. So like when he says, we'll take half the spoils, he's like, oh, well, your half of the spoils is you get the victory, we get the treasure. So he makes his own terms. He's an entrepreneur, a self-made man with a self-made business, right? So I guess that does make sense. That answers my question of why Askeladd's doing the things that he's doing. Because there's freedom to it. He does whatever he wants to. He's as free as the birds. He's like, we'll just do as they do and we'll go wherever we want to survive. and do whatever we have to. And if we have fun along the way, guys, we'll just do that, our merry band of pirates. So that's interesting, right? And so then we cut to the Franks, who are having a civil war. And at first I thought they were fighting the English, but then the helmets didn't look right. And I was like, huh. But yeah, it's the French, the Kingdom of France, vicinity of Loire River. And yeah, so we get this guy who gets shot in the eye with the arrow. And it's just a civil war amongst themselves. They have a ram bring the crossbow. Yeah, it's just so grisly and bloody. This series, what I like about this series is that it's extremely realistic and it does not shy away from the violence that is inherent in this battle. And it's not glorified at all. No, it is not glorified. It is treated very seriously and very grisly, right? Even when Thorfinn is like slicing through those guys, there's nothing really the only thing glorified is when that guy loses his fingers. Oh my gosh. Fun times. But yeah, we don't see the general either, right? The fat general, we don't see him. He like is way off on the sidelines away from all this. I do like the little thing where the one French guys, they all throw their helmets up like, yay! They all throw their helmets up. That's the only thing that's kind of funny in this is them throwing their helmets as the others retreat from the fort. So meanwhile, Askeladd gets the best faces in this episode. For the record, he gets the best expressions. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, so him scouting everything. And I just like, he gets his like little like tweaked eyes like, ha! He's such an opportunist. He reminds me of like a coyote or something, like not a wolf necessarily, but like maybe, but more like a scavenger. Like he seeks, he's an opportunist. He just comes in and is like, oh, we'll do this and we'll take this now, and just seeks out he's like, we're at the right place at the right time. That's like his opportune moment. The Franks, and he's talking to himself. It looks like the Franks are fighting amongst themselves. Or maybe that's Bjorn talking. And the attackers have 800 men and the fort's defended. I can't believe they attacked the fort head on. And this is the local clan's headquarters. He's like, doesn't it smell like treasure? So yeah, so he's like, oh, look at that. He's like, look at all this. Look at this laid out right at our feet. So that's what you're after. He's like, yeah. He's like, we raid this place, we'll have enough to like feast for months. We'll be able to survive the winter and hibernate on all this treasure. He's like, let's do it, Askeladd. I do like the relationship between Askeladd and Bjorn in this. I do like that. He's like, okay, we'll side with the attackers. We'll smash open the treasure chest and take everything inside. So it's like, it's a perfect thing. He's like, we'll go with the attackers. We'll raid the place. And then while they're busy attacking, we'll take the stuff and go. Like a pirate would. I just love he has that kind of like his eyes are like all like mismatched. It's great. And all the guys are like, yeah, that sounds great, Captain. I was wondering why we came to the boonies. Like, it's so violent and like cruel that they're going to kill all these people and just exploit the situation. They just came to exploit the Civil War, take the money and run. And it's like the worst thing, but it's almost endearing how the pirates are like, yeah, good job, Captain. But Thorfinn doesn't care about any of this. That's one thing I like about Thorfinn's character, as edgy as it is. And I know a lot of people will be like, Romania, really? you're celebrating Thorfinn being miserable? Because he is. He's miserable. But I like that Thorfinn, he hasn't, like these guys, the pirates, they view this lifestyle as great. Like this is their glamour. Like they get to show up, take the treasure, and like be all covered in spoils and everything. Like to them, this is glamorous. This is great. Thorfinn doesn't consider this great. This is like, our poor boy is like living in an angsty teenage hell right now because he can't battle the one guy he wants to. And Thorfinn doesn't take any of this as being something to smile about. He's just in constant state of angst, right? But he kind of should be. Like the stuff, it's funny, we almost consider it endearing that these pirates are so happy and joyful about murdering all these people and taking their money. But Thorfinn's like, I realize how messed up this is. I'm just following along because I want to get revenge. Right? He's like, you're amazing, Askeladd. And them high-fiving each other. I'm like, oh my God, your predictions were spot on. And Askeladd's like, I know. Like, he's so confident. He's like, let's make up for our loss from England. And he says, and then he gets a little bit serious. He's like, Thorfinn, you're up. And of course, we have like the two blades. His father's blade and the other one. And I love that he, like, all the guys looking at him, like, as he slowly comes up with, like, shielding the blades at the same time, trying to be all badass. And he's, our 16-year-old Thorfinn. And he's so short. We're going to war. He hasn't gotten much taller in the last 4 years. He's still pretty short. Like I said, I figure his sister would probably make fun of him. Which she right now, if he was 6 and she was like 9 years older than him, so if he's 16, she's 25 now. So hell, she could be married with a kid for all we know. We don't know. And so we come back to the fort. And like the woman, I like the little tiny details of like the women tending the wounds. The one woman's like picking arrows out of the bodies to recollect them. Crazy stuff. But he's like, we're going to war, and this is called Normanni. And so basically Thorfinn's job is to be the messenger, to go give the message, to go scout around and give the signal for Askeladd and the others. And it would make sense why Thorfinn's the one to do it, because he's pretty agile. He can sneak in, but he's also a kid. So again, the enemy hesitates with the child. They're like, oh, you're a kid. Maybe we shouldn't immediately kill you, right? Even though Thorfinn's pretty deadly. And so he just gives Thorfinn the runaround of what he's supposed to say. I do love that now we have Yudo Umura, who's doing the voice of him, and he's at Sushi from Bungo Stray Dogs, isn't he? I think he is, but he sounds so gruff, like his voice has gotten deeper. He sounds like a young adult, and he's like so gruff about it. He's like, okay, go. What's wrong? And I love Thorfinn's just like, and he looks more and more like it's funny, he looks like his sister. He looks more like his dad with his eyebrows and his eyes and his features, but his nose and his chin are his mother's, like they're more refined, but his eyes and eyebrows and his like messy hair are his father's. And he's kept his hair shorter, like it's fuzzy and big, but it's not like long like Thorfinn's was, like Thor's was. And he's like, do you have any idea how many people I've killed? Like, I've done all of this. Like, it just shows, we go through and see like everything he's been doing. He's like, I've accomplished enough and you still won't duel me. He's like, oh, you want a reward? And the thing is, Askeladd knows exactly what he's talking about. He knows exactly what he's talking about. Because Thorfinn's like, I've killed all these people for you. I've done all these shitty things that I didn't want to do. But I've done it because I want to duel you, you bastard. And you're not going to let me do it. How much more do I have to do, right? And Askeladd tries to skirt around it, being like, oh, you want me to pay you? Oh, I'll give you 3 gold pieces if you close the deal. And all the guys are like, oh, really? That's a lot of money for a little kid. And he's like, I don't want the money. Yeah, and he's like, how long do you plan to keep running away? And again, Thorfinn's whole thing is don't run away. He's like, how long are you going to run from me? He's like, I've done all these stuff for you for the last 8 years. When are you going to accept my offer to duel again? And I like that. Oh, and Askeladd being like, I'm so scared. It's like, oh. He's like, I was joking. And I like that. He's like, you'd have to bring me a head with a helmet if you want that. So yeah, he's like, if you want to duel me, you've got to prove your worth. Bring me the helmet of somebody higher up. And Thorfinn's like, fine, that's a concrete thing I can do. And so then, he goes on. And Naruto runs away. And Bjorn, like, he never changes. So Bjorn. I like Bjorn in this. He's like, he's still the same kid after 8 years. He just wants to duel you. He's never changed. His ideology has pretty much stayed pretty concrete at this point. And he's like, are you sure that this kid can handle the negotiation? But Askeladd does think he can handle it. That's the thing. He tries to mask it here, right? Askeladd's like, soldiers are short-tempered. They might kill the messenger before the negotiation starts. That happens all the time. And he says, who cares if we lose some kid that follows us? I feel like that's a front. I'm like, no, Askeladd knows One, he knows how serious Thorfinn is about wanting to duel him. So he's like, no, if I tell him that I'll let him duel me if he makes the deal go through and gets me the head of a soldier, he's like, it's a win-win for Askeladd, because Askeladd's like, it gets the job done. He's going to do it well because he knows what's on the line and what's at stake. And if he gets me the head of some guy with a helmet, he's probably going to be higher up, so that'll only help us in battle. So for Askeladd, he is just stringing Thorfinn along. He's like, nah, I'm just going to keep playing this kid. And but it's funny, he keeps on saying, he's like, who cares if he dies? But I'm like, I think Askeladd does care in the weirdest of ways. I think he wants Thorfinn maybe not cares is the right word, but I think he wants Thorfinn to live. Because I think maybe he sees some of that potential that was there with Thor's, and he wants Thorfinn to live and not waste his life. So maybe that's part of it. We don't know for sure. Askeladd, again, is very hard to read, but I don't think he just doesn't care about Thorfinn. I don't believe that. No, and I definitely think Bjorn cares about Thorfinn too. We'll talk about that at the end of this. But yeah, so we get some Christian overtones here with the guy holding up the cross. And then again, I really love in this series how language is treated seriously. That it's like, is there anyone who can speak Norse here? And they're like, what's wrong with you? What language is this? Like, they're French, so they don't know what he's saying. But they managed to find one guy there who knows Norse. It's funny. And yeah, Thorfinn is not to be messed with. He's had 8 years on the battlefield and knows exactly what to do. But then we meet the general, right? This general eating all the ribs. And as the people are like scrounging around eating scraps of soup, there's this fat general that's eating the ribs, the spare ribs. And he knows that they're mercenaries. He looks like a toad. He has it almost felt like a Studio Ghibli. It felt like Spirited Away. He had the big toad mouth. He looks like one of the guys off of Spirited Away that works at the bathhouse. That's like a frog. That's what he looks like. And he has like all of the nice food and everything around all the other people that clearly do not have that. He's like, you're pretty confident in yourself. Okay, so interestingly, Thorfinn isn't too short. He's pretty tall. He's as tall as this one guy. Okay, so he's taller, right? Some of the Vikings just must be even taller than Thorfinn. And so he makes the deal with the general and everything. Even a kid can see it as they interpret it. I like this. It's interesting. The funny thing is that the general is probably, even though he seems like exaggerated, it's probably not too far off, because it just depends, but it's probably not too far off of how he looked, depending on royalty and upper nobility at that time. There could have been some inbreeding go along, so maybe he looked like that. I don't know. But yeah, he basically Thorfinn's pretty good at negotiating Askeladd's deal here, because he's like, it doesn't matter if you kill me. If I don't get the signal that the deal's closed, they're going to attack you anyway. So Thorfinn does a really good job. He uses that apathy to his advantage, just being like, whatever, do what you want. It's your loss if you kill me, right? So Thorfinn's able to make it work for his favor. It's interesting. And so he's like, we're either going to work for you and take half the spoils, or we're going to go over to the other fort and help them take you guys out. So whatever you choose. Like, we're Normanni, we're 100 strong, so it's your option. You're lost, right? And I like that he's like, fine. And I like that as he says, I'll share my bread equally, Thorfinn's expression is pretty blank. He's just like, just give me back my dagger. It's a memento from my father. I love that. He's like, I just want my sword back, my knife back. It's my dad's. He just says the one dagger. I guess he doesn't care if they kept the other dagger or not. But I love that throughout all of this, Thorfinn is still so tied to that memory of his father and the love that he had for his dad. It's actually I like that a lot with his character. And so then we get the signal and they go in. Let's cross paths before the moon rises. I love the whole thing. I love the thing where these guys eating the soup watching the boat. They see the dragon head coming, the ship coming in the night over the moon. I love it. The bad omen. It's so great. And it makes sense because, yeah, it's back in the early thousands. They would think it really was a dragon, right? They think it was actually a real life dragon. And just, oh my God. Thorfinn taking off, him seeing the man with the, I love him seeing the man with the arrow in his, the feather in his helmet being like, that's the guy I gotta take out, right? Oh my gosh, I love it. And so then, yeah, and he tells him just to attack. You'll understand soon. But of course, Askeladd's just fashionably late, right? He's just fashionably late to battle. What can he do? So yeah, and then Thorfinn just takes off. He's like, that's the guy I want to kill. I gotta go get him. All right. Oh my God, Thorfinn, as he goes out into battle, it's great. And then he senses that they're coming. And I love that Askeladd is just having the freaking time of his life. Just so the whole thing with the ship coming out of the woods, it's ridiculously violent and cruel what's about to happen, but you can't help but smile being like, Askeladd, you mad lad, what are you doing? And the other soldiers hearing the ship coming, and they just push it off into the open. I freaking love it. And I love that the general, that the other guy that's lost his eye, like grabs him and goes under the ship. That shot of Askeladd, that shot's probably gonna be the thumbnail. It's ridiculous. I don't know, maybe the one with him, all the jewelry and all the crown and everything in the gold. But these guys, these Vikings, carrying a ship on their shoulders. And that ship's pretty damn sturdy. But then Askeladd just leading them on. Ridiculous. With the sword, so ridiculous. Oh my God, I love it. And Thorfinn just like leaping through the barriers and just like taking off. Like, again, inhuman strength. Like, there's no way anybody could leap that far. Nah. God. That is like the one aspect that takes you out of it. Even though like we talked about in the earlier episodes, there was the legendary figures. That is part of like the mythology, though, in a story like this, is that it's realistic and grounded in reality. But then there's that little bit of like fantastical element, like him being able to jump like 20 feet through the air and landing on the fort with the knives. Like, that's a little bit fantastical, but it's tied in with the storytelling, so it works, right? And him just climbing up. Oh my God. And I love it. I love how they phrase this. They get the boats into the moat and then they row. I love they use the blunt head of the axe as the drum. I love that. That's great. It's also kind of symbolically tied to the fact that they're Vikings, that they're mercenaries, that violence is part of their life, that it's the axe blade that makes it to be like the drum beat. It symbolically fits. Oh, it's great. I could just see some of this happening in the manga. He's like, those were friendly forces. Don't stop until the fort falls. And all the guys are like, you were just telling us to kill him a second ago. Oh. He's like, I never imagined they'd carry their ship over the pass. And the general's like, don't hesitate. Just 80 men from the right wing go to the boat landing and crossbowmen this way. Okay. So, and they don't see Thorfinn coming. Okay, as he's climbing up. He's like, I hate this. And I love the juxtaposition of Thorfinn hating life and hating having to do this, and Askeladd just laughing and having the time of his life. It's ridiculous, right? Is that all you've got? He's like, the lake's not a barrier. It's a shallow pond that makes for a perfect attack. That is so key to Askeladd's personality. He doesn't view things as obstructions. He views things as a means to work in his favor. So something that one person would consider to be a challenge or something that would get in his way, he's like, no, this isn't an obstruction. It's not a barrier. This is a means for us to attack. We will use this to our advantage. So again, him just being this opportunist and taking full advantage of anything he's given and making it work in his favor. Like, that's probably what I like best about Askeladd's character, is that he just has that optimism. And maybe optimism isn't the right word, but he has that ability to take something that would be to his detriment and make it work in his favor. And just, oh my gosh. And just that ingenuity of going in. And dude is lucky. The arrows totally miss him. It's really disturbing that he uses the arrow. He uses the sword to deflect the arrow. And there's that guy just like floundering behind him, bleeding to death. And Askeladd's just sitting there like, Like, he instantly changes from being like super excited and charismatic to being like serious in a heartbeat. Like it instantly, whatever his men need in that moment, he transitions to. That's kind of where his character gets really scary. And he's like, we'll probably take a few losses because these crossbows are very strong. But then we have Thorfinn. And Thorfinn ends up saving Askeladd and the men. And they all stopped attacking because Thorfinn was killing them all. And yeah, that smile where he's like, prepare to land. That smile is so knowing. He's like, nah, that kid got up there and did what he was supposed to do. He's like, Again, taking advantage in that moment of Thorfinn. Being like, I've got this kid. I'm going to use him. And just doing exactly that. And man, Thorfinn is like, he does not take any pleasure in what he's doing. Like the fingers getting cut off. Ugh. Like there is no pleasure for Thorfinn. It's all business. He's like, no, I'm doing what I have to do to get to this guy and take his head. And if I have to cut through you all so you don't kill me, so be it. But damn. And the camera angle and everything. Oh, it's great. And just seeing him take the head. And then he was like, oh shit, it fell off into the water. So he misses most of the battle because he goes off into the water to get the helmet back. It's like, awesome. Great, he misses most of the battle through that. But yeah, then the Vikings all raid. They just basically went around the fort, raided it from the inside, gutted it from the inside, took all the treasures, and left. He's like, go on a rampage. As him and Bjorn just waltz through the city. Damn. It's crazy. Just the battle, just how quickly things turn. And by the time the soldiers get in there, it's all been said and done. And all the treasure's been taken. And I just love how Askeladd shows up with the crown and everything on. That probably will be the thumbnail of him showing up. A message for the leader of the Franks. And just has like the coat and everything and Bjorn just kind of sitting over there to the side like, oh, you're embarrassing us, Captain. And him just saying, yeah. But they smile at the same time though with the glimmering teeth. Yeah, He's not too embarrassed. As for half of your spoils, you get the victory and we get the treasure. You're fine with that, right? Oh my gosh, it's just like just a map. You guys have a fort, so it's all good, right? And then I love that he's like, sorry, can't understand French. Oh my god. Savages. But it ends up thinking the boat being so loaded down with treasure, I'm sure actually helped them get over the waterfall. It added some weight so it didn't like bounce and get broken up too much. Oh my gosh. And so he's like, let's call it a night. Now, at this point, Bjorn says Thorfinn hasn't returned. Bjorn cares about Thorfinn in his own weird way because he's like, oh, we shouldn't leave the kid behind. And yeah, he's not returned yet. And he's like, oh, really? Well, I bet he's dead anyway. It's like, you're such a liar. Now there's more treasure for us. Because he can't show, Askeladd's whole thing is he's like, I can't show sentimentality. I fully believe that Askeladd has sentimentality for this kid. Even if it's in a twisted, warped way, I think he does care about Thorfinn. Even if it's just the fact that he's Thor's son and he respected Thor's. Even if it's just that. I think that there is some sentimentality there. But Askeladd cannot show it because he's the leader. He has to appear the most strong, the most emotionally detached. He can care for his men, but he can't show any weakness. And showing sentimentality towards Thorfinn would be a weakness. So he's like, he's probably dead. We can just leave without him. But I'm sure that he doesn't believe he's dead. And then that's when the head comes up and he notices that there's Thorfinn. And they're like, oh, he brought the head of the guy back. You're alive. Oh my gosh, you're tough, kid. Did you get hurt? Like all the pirates, they still berate Thorfinn and be like, oh, you're a tough kid, even though he's been with them for 8 years. They should know better by now, right? And he's like, there's the captain's head. And he's like, oh, well, did you cut it off? I like to ask, it's like, oh, did you actually cut it off or did you just find it? Like he questions him, even though you know he knows. Yeah. And then I love that he picks up, he has the dagger. He's like, you promised, and I won't let you say no. And I love this line. I, a warrior from Iceland, son of Thor's Thorfinn, challenge you to ask in the name of my father's sword, challenge you, Askeladd, to a duel, to avenge my father's death. And Askeladd's like, you're still on about this, aren't you? And he's like, okay. And he's like, fine, I, son of Olaf, Askeladd, in the name of Artorius, my ancestor, accept your challenge, Thorfinn. But not right now. We're about to get killed. We have to get out of here first, right? However, we should escape before we ask again later. We got to get out of here right now. Yep. And I love that Thorfinn's just like, you better not forget. I feel like the moment in the OP where they're in the snow and they're doing the duel again, that's going to be the next episode probably, because we've established that there's going to be winter. So either the next episode or the episode after that is going to be the duel again between Askeladd and Thorfinn. Now, do I think Thorfinn's going to win? No. I don't think he's ready yet. I think Askeladd's still stronger. Or it may not even be that Askeladd is stronger. It may be that Askeladd is smarter and will be able to outwit Thorfinn. Because Thorfinn's established he's pretty damn strong. So I'm like, I can see why Askeladd's been avoiding the duel for this long, because he sees how strong Thorfinn's becoming. But I'm like, is he? I don't know. I feel like maybe Thorfinn will be able to injure him or like scrape him or scar him or something. But at the same time, I think Askeladd's still smart enough he can outwit Thorfinn in terms of how to like dodge and do things to like get to where he can win the duel. But we'll see, right? We shall see. But yeah, we just end it with all the pirates celebrating, with all the striking it big with all the treasure and going through the lake. It's beautifully animated. I like the animation on that river. We'll survive the winter with all that we've gotten. And they're all so happy with all their little horns. And Askeladd's smiling, grinning like a Cheshire cat. And with his back to Thorfinn. And Thorfinn just looking at him. Angry. Because that's the thing. Thorfinn is not participating in any of the spoils. He's not drinking with the men. He's not eating with them. He's just frustrated. Because all he wants is revenge. And he's been denied it for 8 years. Yeah. So, this was a good episode. This was a really good episode. I liked how it set up more with Askeladd, more with Bjorn, definitely more with Thorfinn and where he's at mentally, and just getting the idea of what these Vikings, what these pirates do when they're, in off season. They just go and stock up enough to survive the winter, right? Indeed. So yeah, so that's interesting. But I really enjoyed this episode. Really enjoyed it. I hope y'all did too. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But yeah, I think that either next episode or the episode after it, episode 8 or 9, will have that rematch between Thorfinn and Askeladd and see how it goes. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 8 of Vinland Saga. Bye.